founded no school, no movement, there were no apostles, she left no anointed successors. She was this itinerant, tangential, isolated woman, you know, walking the difficult terrains of Kashmir. And yet, today, I think every Kashmiri would know about her, whether in Kashmir or in the diaspora, you know, whether Hindu, whether Muslim. And she continues to inspire so much. Uh, uh, you know, I feel like in other parts of India, we probably have not heard of her the way we should have. Welcome to you all. Hope we pronounce her name right. Some people say Lal Ded, some people say Lal Ded. The idea is to associate with the legacy that she's left behind for us, in the form of vakhs or utterances that she said. So an oral tradition that if we meditate upon or if we read can help bring us closer to the reality that she embodied, which was the reality of Shiva, which is the reality of consciousness, all that there ever is. So Hindol, very excited to be speaking about this mystic today. Lalleshwari, Lal Ded, Lalla Yogini, Lalla Rifa, beloved by both Hindus and Sufis alike.
That's right. A 14th century, by some accounts, a 14th century poetess, saint of Kashmir. She really grew up in times when, in a sense, the rule in Kashmir, the princely rule or the kingly rule in Kashmir, there was a power transition happening from Hindu kings to Muslim kings. And there was a lot of turmoil, a lot of conflict all around her. And here is this incredible little girl who's married off only at the age of 12. And Lalla, as they call her affectionately in Kashmir, in a sense cannot really fit into her husband's home, and then steps out into the world really seeking answers which turn her towards a higher consciousness, a higher devotion. And she goes out, in a sense, in the forests and the woods and the paths of Kashmir, alongside the rivers and the trees and the animals, looking in fact for God.
That's right. And she was not happy in the marriage as well, Hindol. So obviously she had the predisposition towards meditation, and a lot of her samskaras were towards the spiritual path. But even within that, I think the family was not supportive, and they really did not even feed her food and really tormented her. And there's this one story that goes that one day when she got the water from the well in the pot, she used to carry the pot on her head and get the water from the river. She must have meditated longer there by the river. Such masters, their hours can go by and them seated in meditation. Her husband, out of anger, broke the pot, with a stick. And the legend goes that the water remained on the head. And she used that to pour it into the different utensils in the house, and also by the house where a river started flowing, or a lake, as some stories go, so that her family would, never need to go and get water. And that's the day she left. She was one of those wandering mystics, in the very classic tradition of wandering, isolated. But before she set out to even wander, she met her guru, Siddha Shrikant, a Kashmiri Shaivite master. Now, Hindol, the Kashmiri Shaivism tradition is a very interesting tradition, right? Because it has aspects of so many interactions that was Kashmir at that time. There was the interaction with the Vedantic thought through Adi Shankaracharya, who'd come from Kerala. There was the Yogacara school in Buddhism, the Mahayana interaction. It was a 1,000-year-old tradition. There was definitely an interaction with the Tantric way of life, the school of the philosophy of Tantra. And Kashmiri Shaivism grew out of these very interesting philosophies where it took aspects of all and yet made it its own, where there is not necessarily a denial of the world, but an embracing of it, seeing everything as the pulsating union of Shiva and Shakti. And very interesting practices come out of this tradition. But at the end of it, the path is very similar to all Indian schools of thought, which is transcending this mortal body to be united with the divine, and also recognizing that all of this is a play of the divine. In this case, Shiva. And so she was schooled in this philosophy with her master. And like you mentioned, Hindol, there was an transition happening into the Muslim rule. There was actually a lot of interaction with Sufism elements as well, which also, influenced Lalla. And a lot of Sufis got inspired by her. In fact, the Rishi order of Sufism, Kashmiri Sufism, actually considers Lalla as, their main inspiration. And Nand Rishi, who started it, the Sufi, he was said to find sustenance through Lalla's vakhs versus even his mother's breast milk. So the legend goes. And so they took a lot of inspiration from her. And so Lal Ded is this vast expanse she traverses in Kashmir, taking from these various schools of thought and making it this beautiful, radical sort of expression of jnana and bhakti as her own.
What an incredible story. One of the things that I read about Lal Ded, which was fascinating for me, that she was called Padmavati when she first got married as a little child. And she was obviously not treated well at all, not given proper food, not, made to do all kinds of work and so on and so forth. And there's this popular saying that she was being teased that a lot of, there's a feast in your household and lots of food is going to come, and she says that, no matter what they slaughter, what animal they slaughter, and, no matter how large the feast, I will only get a stone to eat. There's so much poignancy in that, that sentence. So much pain, so much pathos.
That's right. And apparently, you're right, like because the stone was covered with a little bit of rice just to show others that she was being given that. But Hindol, that's the amazing part about her, where she could have, if she wanted, remedied the situation, so to speak. A lot of these masters are capable of doing feats of taking themselves out of distress. But that is also an entry into where they're supposed to go and therefore lead us to, right? So through this pathos, she realized what is there really. I mean, she calls so many references where she calls the body just this carcass. It's very like brutal word, so to speak, to transcend through all of this suffering. Because at the end of the day, there is no suffering. As she says, my master gave me just one rule, forget the outside, get to the inside of things. I, Lalla, took that teaching to heart. From that day, I've danced naked. And she doesn't only mean naked as in, going within and stripping it all of complete material wants and desires, but naked quite literally. And imagine in the Kashmir of 14th century, here is a woman stark naked, wandering around, speaking these utterances of the Lord. And a very interesting fact about Kashmiri Shaivism is a lot of the men who used to practice it were actually householders, unlike a lot of Indian traditions where, it is normal to leave the household and go in search of the self. So here is a woman who has not only renounced the household, but has also left the home and left quite literally her clothes as well.
It's really an incredible story. The more you think about it, the more amazed you are that, these things happened in our country. And so, in a sense, there is such a history, there is such a deep seated legacy of this kind of spirituality. I'm looking at, of course, another Lal Ded Vakh, Lal Ded Vakh. 1,000 times at least I asked my guru to give nothingness a name. Then I gave up. What name can you give to the source from which all names have emerged? There is such a sense of this poetess, in a sense, merging into into all creation around her, and really stripping away, like the clothes she threw away, even every aspect of her identity, the physical self, her name, her source of identity, all of this one by one is stripped away, so that in a sense she merges with the divine. She gives up her entire identity to the divine, and this complete sharnagati, this complete devotion to God, so that you become one with God, is such an incredible journey.
That's right, and if you see, yes, definitely she has stood for what a lot of the Bhakti movement saints in our country stood for at that time. Remember, Hindol, when the whole Varkari movement was happening in Maharashtra, there was the Basavanna, the Lingayat movement in Karnataka, there was the Vaishnava tradition of Tamil Nadu, there was the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in West Bengal, and you know, the Vallabha tradition in the northern parts of India. So, what was common with Lal Ded and these Bhakti poets was this complete breaking free from, say, rituals which don't have a soul. So that, not to say that rituals don't have a soul, but from soulless ritualism. So if you don't, if you're or like just fearing God or wanting an interlocutor in the form of a priest, the Brahmins, or speaking only in the Dev Bhasha of Sanskrit, right? They all wanted to connect directly with the divine. They wanted to speak the Loka Bhasha. They wanted to denounce things like animal sacrifice, or so many things which they felt come in the way of seeking that union. And Lal Ded was very similar, that she also wanted people to recognize. So there was definitely a lot of social messages also in her vakhs. But like you said, it was more a lot to do with going within. Like, if there's one thing that we can look through, or one lens we can take in hers, it's like the inner world is key. Go within. All of this is just ash. Break through it, go within, you will find him there. So when the dirt was wiped away from my mind's mirror, people knew me for a lover of God. When I saw him there, so close to me, he was all, I was nothing. So recognizing that was definitely a recurring message of her works. But yes, she also stood up against, like I mentioned, a lot of this complications in our religion. She also stood up for for women, But what is interesting, Hindol, about a lot of these Bhakti women saints, unlike, let's say, a lot of feminist writings that we read, both important, definitely. Women have been subjugated, women have been oppressed. But what I love to read about from the Bhakti perspective of feminism is it's not angry. There's not so much anger, um, venom spewing, so to speak, or even like just putting down others. Yes, there is a recognition that this is something, that we can do better with, that there is no gender. This gender construct is a very, like, man worldview, so to speak. So, even if we see in Muktabai's case, or even in Lalla's case, they tell the others, what is this? What is this? So, yeah, I'm naked, like in Lalla's case. But what are you seeing? A human body? Really? Is that what you see? Is it what you see, a female body? Or, in Muktai's case, I think she was once bathing, the story goes, and Changdev, one who became her disciple later, he saw her and he got very embarrassed and looked away. And she said, what are you looking away from? What is the difference? I'm surprised that you're still seeing a body. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, there was this much more gentler approach to teachings. And I think that's what makes them all very deeply spiritual as well, that at the ultimate thing, they're recognizing that you are me, I am you, and we are ultimately that.
This is beautiful Lal Ded verse where she says, he laughs when you laugh, sneezes in your sleep, yawns for you, coughs for you. He bathes every day in the river of your thoughts. He is naked all year around, walks where you walk. Just go up and introduce yourself. truly this is the introduction that Lalla Lalleshwari really sought all her life and indeed found, in a sense, completely dissolving even the final barrier between man and God, so to speak, really immersing oneself in truly the search for and of the divine. One of the great traditions that Kashmir once had is this conversation between different strains of mysticism. You mentioned the Sufis and how she inspired, and her vakhs inspired them. And of course, one of the great things is that the first mention of Lalleshwari or Lal Ded comes actually from this book, it is said, which was written in the 16th century, called the Tadkirat ul Arfin, which in a sense is a account of many of the sages and mystics of the Kashmir region of the valley. And it was written by Mullah Ali Raina, who's the brother of another very famous mystical saintly figure of Kashmir, Maktoum Sahib. And this interaction, this conversation, this commonality in mystic view is something that we have forgotten about, and I think it's a very important and a rich tradition. This is the
Yeah.
tradition, in a sense, that Dara Shikoh wanted to bring in, to enrich this dialogue, this collaboration.
Right. That's I did not know that about the brother part. In fact, I think they're like vakhs. I think in this Sufism school, their utterances are called sruks, I think, and they are replete with terms like nirguna and avatara as well. And so, yes, like you said, there was a lot of cross pollination between the two schools of thought, and much like how that story goes, Hindol, where Saint Kabir, there was this argument between the Hindus and Muslims about what will happen to his body. Will we bury it or will we burn it? And when they picked up the shroud, it was just fresh flowers there. When we just try to lay claim, I feel like there's no point in going down that road. I have heard talks, where there've been, desires to omit certain things, elements from each other's language and culture, but we have to go beyond all of that because her message was so poignant about getting to the ultimate and seeing Shiva and Shakti in your hearts and their play, and you will just dissolve and none of this matters. She was a beautiful amalgamation of bhakti, yes, but more gyan marg. How we have these different traditions, different schools, depending on our temperaments. The jnana marg is more of an evolved awareness of, questioning and seeking that ultimate. She embodied these beautifully, and there's so much that she's left for the Kashmir, the evolved Kashmiri thought that we have today, because Kashmir has produced great Hindol, as you know, starting from Abhinava Gupta and so many others, and so many others who came after her as well. So it was a great center of this Hindu thought.
Yes, and when you read, she wrote more than 250 vakhs, or said, really, uttered, so to speak, uttered 250 vakhs. And it's an incredible story about how these vakhs, these sayings, these verses spread across the Kashmiri region and inspiring hundreds and hundreds of people. So much so that, in a sense, she became and has become one of the cornerstones of spirituality in Kashmir. Of course, as you say, the later day there's been all kinds of conversations, but at the very heart of it, Lal Ded is a cornerstone of Kashmiri mysticism, and of course, as a great Shaivite, she shows the path on how the Indian Himalayas also are really the abode of Shiva.
That's right. And I think Hindol, one of the biggest hospitals there is also the LD, Lal Ded Hospital, right, in Srinagar. So a lot of places named after her, and she really left behind a lot. And what is interesting again, of course, these vakhs, like we've said a few of them. You can see how powerful it is, a direct message she's telling us. But it is also a solace to read that even then people recognized this fickleness of this monkey mind of ours, which just is so hard to tame. It's the Bhagavad Gita, they say, right, it's easier to tame the wind than it is to tame the mind. And so, for a lot of us who are struggling with these chitta vrittis, as they say in yoga, these fluctuations, vacillations of the mind, and wondering why can't I meditate or why can't I, focus. They have all struggled with it forever and ever. And one of the vakhs someone had translated in Hindi where she says, "Man mera bheta chala koso mil, chhapakte man kuch घोड़े जैसा, जानू ना अगर खींचना लगाम, टूटेगा वो खिलौने जैसा." It's like runaway horses. And if I don't know how to pull the reins, it'll break like a toy. Like, a child can just pick up its toy and throw it on the ground. It'll come to pieces. And the ways of getting there are these spiritual practices to get that reins to the horses. And she is really a big advocate of Nam Japa. So, like which a lot of Bhakti movement teachers were. The name of God, then breath, which yoga would definitely swear by, so to speak, the medium of breath to go within. And then, of course, other practices are the part of the tradition in which, your master lays it down for you. And also to make us recognize that these outward material wealth, etc., will only take you that far. Another Hindi translation where she says, "Jeet lo sansar ko raj karo, na hoga man shant. त्याग दो सब फिर भी ना होगा मन शांत. निर्मल शरीर की मृत्यु नहीं, जीते जी मर जाना ही सब कुछ पाना." And this is subtle but very beautiful because, okay, fine, जीत लो संसार को, राज करो, win everything, rule the world, still your mind will not be at ease. We can see that with a lot of really successful, famous people, not at ease, right? But she's also saying, त्याग दो सब फिर भी ना होगा मन शांत. So a lot of times people are like, oh, I should just leave everything and go away. But the mind is what's coming with you there also, right? Where will you escape to? So निर्मल शरीर की मृत्यु नहीं, जीते जी मर जाना ही सब कुछ पाना. And how do you जीते जी मरो? It's like, how do you die even while you're living? That's through one of these paths, where you let go of this material wealth, material body, etc. But transforming yourself from within. So that balance again she used to strike. She used to also mock people who used to do too much starvation or to try to do these miracles, siddhis when they achieve walking on fire or, producing something out of thin air. What is the point of like all of these austerities also, or starving to death? Eat enough that you can live, she would say, but also don't be a glutton and so many things. So she also has a lot of relevance in Dole in our day-to-day lives.
I'm reminded, of course, of Swami Vivekananda, who I think was asked about these siddhis and miracles. And he said, what is the meaning of this? Did my master teach me whatever he taught me so that I can turn water into wine, so to speak? What is the miracle that I need to show you? Now, the other thing, of course, is that, I'm thinking, even as you say, about this idea that even extreme austerity will not lead you to the path. And remember, the Siddhartha, Prince Siddhartha, who later became the Buddha, actually, this was his experience. He gave up everything, went through the greatest austerities, and that's why you see some of the Buddhist statues or statuettes show the Buddha almost like a skeleton, with his ribcage showing and his bones completely showing. That is the Buddha going through the greatest penances and austerities. And in fact, even then, he could not find the answer. Finally, as they say, when he gave up the desire even to attain enlightenment, the final desire, so to speak, that's when it dawned on him, right? That
Right.
that was even the desire to attain enlightenment had become a barrier. These austerities, these forced austerities, had become a barrier to him really reaching the truth, which it's such an incredible lesson, such a powerful lesson, also clearly in the teachings of Lal Ded, that extreme penance is also an attachment of a different kind, and the idea is to move away from attachment.
That's right, Hindol. And I'm curious, I would love to ask the listeners, if they have any favorite Lal Ded vakhs that they can send in to us. Because it's an oral tradition, a lot has been lost, a lot has been added or embellished or, you know, um, if someone has something that they know, it would be so good to hear, because 258 is what we have seen, the vakhs, but who knows? Maybe there are more, or maybe there are different translations or different interpretations from another reader's perspective.
And you can also send us and upload instead of writing a comment. You can also read them out. Whether in Kashmiri, whether in Hindi, a translation in Hindi, whether a translation in any other language, or of course English. You can upload your own readings as comments in the comment section, and tell us more about what you know, because this is one of those eternal stories of an eternal saint of India. I think as long as Kashmir is there, there will be the mention of Lalleshwari's incredible poetry and her utter, complete devotion to Shiva, to Lord Shiva. And I think there is such incredible learning of this, girl who's married at the age of 12, leaves her home, suffers in a family, and then steps out, in a sense, to not just conquer the world through her spirituality, but really to conquer herself, and manages to do so, and manages at a time to really give up all sort of frameworks and boundaries that the world puts around us, including how we should look, what we should behave like. All of that disappears, and she really, truly is able to completely surrender to the divine.
That's right. And in closing, we really don't know how she took samadhi, or where did she go, where did she take mahasamadhi. But one of the stories goes that she was meditating, and then, flames engulfed her, and she was smiling in the meditative posture, and she was just, disappeared into the air. And some of her people, who used to follow her, were sad. And she came the next day in beautiful clothes, it says, and in beautiful form, and she told them that I'm always here. Where have I gone? If there's one thing that you can learn from this whole journey, is that this body goes, but we don't really go anywhere. So if you want, you'll always have access to me, and I think we just have these saints' presence in our lives, and we always say, one of these truths, if we pick up one of these timeless truths, have the power to change our life, to raise our vibes, and to apply in our day-to-day living. So thanks so much for being with us here on this edition of Sacred. Hindol and I are very grateful that you listen to us every week. Thank you so much, and namaste.
Namaste.